to the future. Could it actually happen with a real time machine?
In 1995, Mike Markham stunned listeners of Coast to Coast AM when he claimed he made a steel screw vanish using a modified Jacob's ladder and a laser. He was later arrested for stealing transformers to power his device, triggering a Missouri brownout. After serving time, he returned with a sharper, more obsessive focus.
I was devastated. I thought if I could build a time machine that I could go back and see him again and tell him what was going to happen, maybe save his life.
In 1997, he disappeared following a mysterious garage fire, leaving behind a scorched note. It's not about time. It's about perspective. A chilling mystery that plagued the world was born. Ringing bells. In the mid-1990s, anyone interested in the paranormal knew Coast to Coast AM, the legendary late-night radio show exploring UFOs, ghosts, conspiracies, and unexplained phenomena. Created and hosted by Art Bell from the 1980s until his retirement in 2007, the show brought fringe topics into the mainstream through listener call-ins and expert guests. Today, it continues under George Noory and other hosts, maintaining its cult status. One remarkable call came in January 1995 from a man who identified himself only as Mike, from Missouri. Mike was a young electrical enthusiast and tinkerer with no formal higher education, yet he had built a reputation in hobbyist circles for his inventive experiments. He called Bell not to boast about a polished invention, but to report an extraordinary, unintentional breakthrough. He had seemingly created a form of time travel. Mike's device was far from the science fiction cliché of a glowing multi-billion-dollar sphere. At its core, it was a modified Jacob's ladder, a high-voltage physics demonstration with two diverging metal rods forming a V. The electric arc ignited at the narrow base, heated the air, and traveled upward until it extinguished at the top, then restarted in a continuous loop. He paired it with a laser from a modified CD player, using focused heat to stabilize the air above the ladder, creating what he described as a persistent vortex of energy, a terrestrial whirlpool that, in his view, could bend time. On air, a stunned silence greeted Mike's explanation. He continued, describing the first test: a simple metal screw tossed into the vortex. For half a second, it vanished entirely, only to reappear moments later. Mike insisted he felt time itself bend in that instant. The device's simplicity belied its complexity. It consumed enormous amounts of electricity and resources, something a lone tinkerer could scarcely afford. So how did he do so by himself? Cuffs worn by scientists. Stunned and confused about how this innovation was possible, the Coast to Coast radio show invited Mike from Missouri to the studio to speak live. Mike Markham discussed his experiments, describing how he had built everything from scratch. At 21, studying electrical sciences, he was academically brilliant, far ahead of his peers, but funding was his greatest limitation. His small-scale vortex proved his ingenuity, but advancing to the next stage required far more power than any residential system could provide. Initially, Marcum built a transformer capable of about 20,000 volts. Yet, driven by obsession, he sought industrial-grade equipment to push his device further, aiming to scale his Jacob's ladder into an actual time-traveling apparatus. Lacking the means, he stole 6 massive power transformers from the St. Joseph Light and Power Company. Each weighed hundreds of pounds and was designed to handle utility-level voltages, well above those of ordinary components. These transformers, necessary to generate the immense energy he believed required, were the key to moving beyond experiments with screws and bolts toward testing the device on himself, reportedly even to glimpse the future or solve his financial troubles. The theft had immediate consequences. Once connected, the transformers drew so much power that several blocks of King City, Missouri, plunged into a blackout. The surge alerted both the utility and local police, who quickly traced the outage back to Marcum. Authorities found the stolen transformers and the time machine apparatus in his garage, leading to his arrest. For the theft, he was sentenced to 60 days in jail and 5 years probation, charged with grand theft, not the alleged time travel experiments themselves. After serving his term, Marcum returned to Coast AM, openly admitting on air that he had stolen the 6 transformers to upscale his project. The confession stunned millions of listeners. He also recounted the mocking nickname Time Machine Man that local papers had given him, a brilliant scientist reduced to a shamed, convicted felon. The 60 days in jail did nothing to extinguish his ambition. If anything, they only strengthened it. When he was released, Marcum emerged not as a dreamer, but as a man determined to finish what he had started, this time by the proper legal route. Markham relocated to Overland Park, Kansas, and dedicated himself to building a time machine within the bounds of the law. He planned 18 months of rigorous testing for the next stage, beginning with live subjects such as hamsters and guinea pigs. By 1996, he returned to the show, declaring he was just 30 days away from a legal prototype. This marked a turning point. Over time, pursuing his experiments legally became less burdensome than it had once seemed. During a Coast to Coast AM segment, Art invited him on air, where he spoke openly about the struggles he faced and outlined his aims for lawful experimentation. His honesty earned him sympathy from the show's like-minded audience, further cementing his growing notoriety. Letters soon flooded the station. On one side were physicists and engineers, writing warnings born of fear of meddling with forces beyond comprehension, forces that could ignite consequences no one could control. They urged him to stop, warning of a fire that could potentially end the world. On the other side were believers, an ever-growing legion who viewed him as a visionary, sending encouragement and urging him to push forward, to achieve the impossible and elevate humanity. Art Bell encouraged this dialogue, giving Markham a platform while maintaining private contact, keeping the show's audience engaged with the fringe science he offered. Support soon became tangible. Anonymous donations began arriving, hundreds of dollars at a time, often with simple notes of encouragement. These gifts provided the catalyst Markham needed to advance his project. With funding secured and a growing audience watching his every move, he acquired a camcorder to document progress, promising fans a first-hand view of his experiments. The path was clear. All that remained was to construct the time machine ladder and climb it. Death by obsession. Years after his arrest and the resurgence of his obsession, Mike Markham reappeared on Coast to Coast AM. But this was not the calm, determined student who had first called in. His voice was rambling, nervous, and agitated, as if he had been pushed to the edge.
Yeah, the one obsession... I just read?
Yeah.
You've heard that, huh?
Yeah. It's like I'm, collecting clippings on it now.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
How old are you, Michael?
21.
21.
The obsession had taken a visible toll. Listeners were left uncertain. Was this a man on the brink of genius, or one unraveling under the strain? "I'm almost there," he insisted. "I just need more power, and a cleaner energy field." His words tumbled out frantically, touching on feedback loops, objects flickering in and out of existence, and animals falling ill after exposure to the time machine. When pressed for details, he repeated the same demands: more power, a cleaner field. This appearance in late 1996 revealed the frightening side effects of his experiments. Despite a raspy, almost deathbed-like voice, Markham's eyes burned with focus. He described objects stuttering between existence and non-existence, caught between timelines. Nearby animals suffered biological effects from the intense electromagnetic field. To Markham, these were not warnings. They were proof of progress. He believed he was on the verge of a breakthrough and insisted he would be the next test subject. A return update was scheduled for March 1997. The world waited. But when the time came, Markham never called. Attempts to reach him went unanswered. Letters returned unopened. Friends and family were unaware of his whereabouts. Mike "Madman" Markham had vanished, this time, not behind bars, but entirely without a trace. Soon after, a fire broke out at his home. Firefighters traced it to a massive electrical overload in the garage. The blaze consumed his workshop, leaving melted copper, twisted wires, and scorched floors where his machines had stood. Among the ruins, no body was found. Investigators recovered a few remnants: a scorched toolbox, the warped metal frame of his Jacob's ladder fused at the tips, and a single cryptic note: "It's not about time, it's about perspective." Questions swirled. Had he been killed in the explosion, or had the fire been an elaborate ruse? Was it government intervention to stop his work, or had Markham finally succeeded in the impossible, traveling through time? Conspiracy theories on conspiracy theorists. According to some fans, the fire was not an accident. It was the explosive result of his final successful experiment. Markham had generated a vortex powerful enough to step through. Where he went remained a matter of debate. Some believed he traveled to the future, to a time when his genius would be recognized and perfected. Others speculated that he traveled into the past, perhaps to correct a mistake. His failure to emerge from the garage explosion was explained in multiple ways: a one-way journey, a time paradox that trapped him, or a timeline he chose to remain in. The idea of permanent disappearance became the prevailing theory. Discussion intensified when a decades-old mystery was linked to his story. Forum users uncovered a 1930s report of an unidentified body washed ashore on a California beach. The man's clothing was oddly anachronistic, and in his pocket was a rectangular metallic device with buttons, resembling a modern cell phone, an impossible artifact for the era. Believers argued Markham had traveled to the past but failed to control his destination, drowning in an unfamiliar time. The device, they suggested, was either a component of his time machine or a piece of technology from his own era, a tantalizing, unverified clue. Although pictures of the person never saw the light of day, it didn't stop the theorist from consistently dropping time bombs upon time bombs. Decades later, the question of, was that Markham, kept reappearing. Naturally, the government cover-up theory also emerged. This idea gained traction decades later, suggesting Markham's experiments had succeeded enough to attract the attention of a secretive agency. According to this theory, the agency seized his research, staged the fire, and made him disappear to control the technology. In 2006, a man claiming to be Markham, under the name Mike Markham, sent an anonymous email to a small college professor in Oregon in response to a blog post about DIY test coils. The email was cryptic, containing hand-drawn sketches of a device labeled Vortex Stabilization Frame Gen 3. Its vagueness and the sudden reappearance of someone who had been missing for decades caused a stir. Investigation traced the IP address to a public library in Kauai, Hawaii, adding yet another layer of mystery. For those who relied on logic over speculation, the fire remained a straightforward explanation. High-voltage experiments carried inherent risk, and an electrical explosion could easily have destroyed him and his apparatus. Critics who had warned him against meddling with extreme forces felt vindicated, arguing that even a single misstep could have catastrophic consequences. Yet the reality remained unresolved until he resurfaced years later, more broken than before, finally hinting at the truth behind his disappearance. An alleged book of revelations. For years, Mike's story became fodder for YouTube videos, TikTok threads, and Reddit discussions, spreading rapidly. Then, in 2015, the tale took a shocking turn. A man claiming to be Markham appeared on a small YouTube podcast. He was older, his voice raspy and worn, echoing the final version of the madman the public remembered. His account was chillingly consistent. After his final experiment, he didn't travel to the past or future. Instead, he awoke in Oregon in 1999, suffering from severe sunburns and amnesia, unable to remember even his own last name for a week. According to him, he spent the following years as a drifter, displaced in both time and place. He found himself 800 miles away near Fairfield, Ohio, surviving in a homeless shelter while slowly recovering his identity. The shocking revelation wasn't that time travel was authentic, it was that his machine had broken the laws of sequence, not time itself. Markham explained that the device didn't propel him through space-time. It created a magnetic feedback loop that destabilized his connection to the linear flow of events. The timeline shifted around him, leaving him disoriented, sunburned, and amnesiac in random locations. He described himself as becoming unaccounted for. The effect, he warned, could ripple to anyone near the apparatus. Minor temporal disruptions, déjà vu, skipped moments, the uncanny feeling of being ahead of oneself. His machine, he claimed, was slowly erasing not only him, but those around him from the narrative of reality. This is more terrifying than conventional time travel. It suggests our existence is fragile, a sequence of events so easily scrambled that we could become ghosts in our own lives. Yet, throughout history, there have been accounts suggesting that time travel may not be entirely impossible. The man from a mythical country. The story known as the man from Taured traces back to a summer day in July 1954 at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. What began as a routine afternoon took a turn when customs officials stopped a well-dressed traveler whose documents appeared ordinary, except for one detail. His passport claimed he was from a country called Taured, a place no one had ever heard of in 1954, and one that still does not exist today. Officials questioned him, suspecting a trafficker or smuggler using forged credentials. The man remained calm, explaining that he was on a standard business trip, one of many he had taken that year. He spoke fluent French and conversed easily in Japanese, adding to the confusion. When asked about Taured, he stated that it was a nation located between France and Spain and had existed for 1,000 years. To support his account, he produced a passport bearing stamps from previous trips, along with a wallet containing currency from several European countries. Customs officers, still unconvinced, handed him a map and asked him to identify his homeland. The traveler pointed directly at Andorra, insisting that Taured should be there, exactly where it had always been. Neither side could explain the contradiction, and the exchange quickly reached a stalemate. With no clear explanation, and every detail deepening the mystery, officials detained the man for further investigation. They placed him in a nearby hotel for the night under guard while they checked his story. But nothing matched. The hotel he claimed to have booked was unaware of him. The company he was scheduled to meet had never heard of his name or the business he claimed to represent. The bank listed on his checkbook could not be found by the authorities. Every attempt to verify his identity led nowhere. The next morning, customs officers returned to the hotel with plans for additional questioning, only to find the room empty. The man had vanished. The guards stationed outside insisted the door never opened, and the room's window offered no possible escape route. Even stranger, all of his belongings, including his passport, checkbook, and driver's license, disappeared from the airport security office that same night. After that morning, the man from Taured was never seen again. His identity, his origin, and the method of his disappearance remain unsolved. Although widely regarded as an urban legend that emerged in the 1960s, the story continues to circulate and to inspire books, films, and numerous interpretations. The Con Artist from the Future. On January 29, 2003, Andrew Carlson was arrested by the FBI on charges of insider trading. In a span of just 2 weeks, he had transformed a modest investment of $800 into a staggering $350 million. Over the course of 126 high-risk trades, he never once lost money, a feat so improbable that it drew immediate suspicion. His remarkable streak of success prompted the Securities and Exchange Commission to involve federal authorities in investigating potential fraud and insider trading. Following his arrest, Carlson reportedly gave a 4-hour confession, claiming to be a time traveler from 2 centuries in the future. He offered to reveal the locations of Osama bin Laden and the cure for AIDS in exchange for leniency, though he refused to disclose the mechanics of his time-traveling methods. A mysterious individual posted his bail, and Carlson was scheduled to appear in court, but he vanished before the hearing. Subsequent investigations found no trace of him, and official records indicate that he may never have existed. What makes his case even more baffling is that Andrew Carlson appeared out of nowhere. There are no birth records, school transcripts, medical files, or any documentation of his existence before the early 2000s. He had no paper trail, no digital footprint, and no verifiable history, as if he had materialized fully formed from the future. Skeptics argue that Carlson was simply a masterful con artist, skilled at evading the law, yet specific details defy conventional explanation. Among them, his precise prediction of the exact date of the U.S. invasion of Iraq lends an unsettling credibility to his claims. While many dismissed him as a fraud, no one could explain how Andrew turned mere hundreds into millions, seemingly armed with knowledge of events that wouldn't happen for another decade. Shocking prediction. 11 years before it actually happened. 3 authors, Ron Edwards, C.B. Colby, and John Macklin, recount a striking case of apparent foreknowledge in the Little Giant Book of Eerie Thrills and Unspeakable Chills. They describe an incident involving reporter J. Bernard Hutton and photographer Joachim Brandt, who were assigned to document the Hamburg shipyard in 1932. As they finished their work and prepared to leave, the low drone of aircraft engines drew their attention upward. The sky was suddenly crowded with fighter planes, and within seconds, bombs began to fall across the shipyard. Explosions erupted around them as anti-aircraft batteries activated in response. The area transformed into a chaotic battleground, with structures collapsing and debris scattered in every direction. Hutton tried to ask a security guard for help, but the guard urged both men to escape immediately. They fled the facility and sped toward Hamburg, shaken and confused by the violence unfolding behind them. Yet as they reached the city, the world seemed to reset. The sky was clear, the streets were quiet, and no sign of an attack was visible. There was no damage, no smoke, and no indication that anything unusual had occurred. When they turned back toward the shipyard, the view was unchanged and pristine, as if the destruction they had witnessed moments earlier had never taken place. Their newspaper rejected the account, and the photographs Brandt had taken offered no support. Every image showed the shipyard in perfect condition. Workers dismissed their story and suggested they had simply overindulged, believing the entire experience was imagined. Hutton later moved to London before the start of the Second World War. In 1943, while reading a newspaper, he came across a report detailing a devastating air raid on the Hamburg shipyard. This attack matched exactly what he and Brandt had witnessed 11 years earlier. While Hutton and Brandt had no control over their experiences, the next individual encountered the phenomenon through deliberate participation in an experiment. A drive back to the past. In 1988, writer Ken Moe published an article titled Time Traveler in Strange Magazine 2, presenting a baffling account involving a man identified only as LC. According to his testimony, the incident occurred in 1969 in the quiet southwest Louisiana town of Abbeville. After finishing lunch, LC and his business partner Bob were driving along Highway 167 toward Lafayette, a route they often used and knew well. It was October 20th at around 1:30 in the afternoon. The sky was clear, the air was cool, and the road ahead was calm. As they continued toward the city, their attention was drawn to a slow-moving vehicle in the distance. The car looked unusually old, shaped like a classic turtleback model neither of them had ever seen on the road. Despite its age, the vehicle appeared flawless, as if it had just rolled out of a showroom decades earlier. When they pulled alongside it, their confusion deepened. The car carried a bright orange license plate marked with the year 1940, an impossibility since antique vehicles were not permitted to operate on public roads unless participating in a special event. Yet here it was, traveling freely in broad daylight. Inside sat a young woman wearing a vintage dress, a small hat, and a fur coat, all unmistakably styled from the 1940s. A child was seated beside her, bundled in a heavy coat and cap. As the men slowed beside the car, the woman reacted with sudden distress. Her face paled, and she scanned her surroundings as though she had been dropped into unfamiliar territory. She appeared desperate for assistance but remained withdrawn, never lowering her window or making direct eye contact. LC repeatedly asked whether she needed help. Although she indicated that she did, she appeared unable to communicate fully. After urging her to stop, they finally saw her pull to the side of the road. LC and Bob moved ahead of her and stopped their own vehicle, but when they looked back, the strange car had vanished without a trace. On a clear highway with no other traffic, the disappearance was inexplicable. Still shaken, they continued their drive. Before long, they saw another bizarre scene unfold on the same stretch of Highway 167. A modern car slowly passed an older vehicle that appeared nearly stationary, and moments later, the older car vanished in the same abrupt manner. The driver of the passing vehicle was equally stunned. The three men compared what they had witnessed and searched the area on foot, but nothing suggested where the car or its occupants could have gone. The third man urged them to report the event, insisting it resembled a missing person case, but LC and Bob refused. They had no evidence, no location, and no logical explanation for what they had seen. The witness agreed that going alone would only undermine his credibility, so he exchanged contact information with them instead, hoping the shared memory would anchor his sanity. Whether the woman and child were displaced from another time or trapped in circumstances beyond understanding remains unresolved. While many scientists consider time travel improbable, several theoretical models leave a narrow possibility open, though burdened with significant obstacles. Let us examine a fascinating idea that raises the possibility of time travel. The slowdown in time. Einstein's general theory of relativity describes space-time as a unified structure that unifies space and time. Massive objects distort this structure, creating gravitational fields that slow the passage of time. This effect, known as time dilation, has been observed through atomic clocks operating near strong gravitational sources and through clocks carried on fast-moving aircraft. In the search for a path into the past, scientists have explored adjustments to relativity, including the idea of a closed time-like curve. A closed time-like curve is a theoretical loop in space-time that allows a person or object to travel backwards and eventually return to the moment they departed. Some solutions to Einstein's equations, such as the Gödel metric, rely on rotating planetary bodies to support such loops, yet these curves present deep problems. They create paradoxes, such as the classic grandfather paradox, in which a traveler can interfere with events that define their own existence. Avoiding such paradoxes demands a careful examination of causality and the internal consistency of space-time. A group of MIT physicists has suggested that quantum teleportation, when paired with post-selection, could constrain what a traveler can do, thereby preventing paradoxes altogether. However, this remains a theoretical idea. Quantum mechanics introduces an additional layer of uncertainty. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle establishes fundamental limits on how precisely specific pairs of physical properties can be measured simultaneously, such as position and momentum. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics propose the existence of alternate timelines in which every possible outcome of a quantum event is realized. These possibilities support long-standing debates about parallel universes and the multiverse. Although the observable universe contains an extraordinary number of galaxies and appears vast beyond comprehension, possibly extending 7 billion light-years, several theories suggest additional realms outside or parallel to our own. These concepts often appear alongside discussions of string theory and the Big Bang, yet none of them provide a framework for moving between universes, a journey most scientists consider impossible. Even if such travel were possible, it remains unclear whether it would qualify as time travel. Practical attempts to model time travel face immense obstacles. The energy required for any form of temporal movement exceeds the capabilities of current technology, especially when dealing with closed time-like curves or exotic forms of matter. Traveling to the future would require speeds approaching the speed of light, whereas traveling to the past would require the use of wormholes, devices we have neither built nor observed. Many proposals require negative mass or negative energy, neither of which is known to exist in our universe. Even designs that avoid negative matter would still need more energy than the entire universe could supply. Additional challenges arise from the unknown nature of dark matter and dark energy, whose properties remain speculative. The concept of quantum gravity, which would unify quantum mechanics and general relativity, remains theoretical in the absence of supporting evidence. When the topic turns to time travel, we are forced to confront ideas that stretch far beyond our current understanding, and we cannot yet imagine how to apply them in practice. Modern theories of time travel are therefore far more complex than the popular image suggests. Ultimately, time travel remains a set of ambitious theoretical models rather than a practical possibility. It is a concept that goes well beyond stepping into a machine and choosing a date in history, and it continues to challenge the limits of physics as we know it. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.